In September 1986, Wendy Cobain loaned Kurt $200 to move into a house with Matt Lukin from the Melvins. 1,500 East 2nd Street was quickly turned into more of a rehearsal space than a house, and it was here that Kurt and Chris' music really begun to take shape.
Chris says, you ought to come over, we're practicing or whatever, we got this band together. So we went to this little house over on the east side of Aberdeen, just look dive. I don't know if you guys got a chance to look at it, it's still there. And Matt Lukin and Kurt were living together. Well, I knew Matt from the Melvins from before, and so anyway, we wandered on in, and it was pretty scary, borrowed equipment.
It was behind the Thriftway on B Street in Aberdeen, and it was a horrible little house, but he was really proud of it. I remember that he was really hurt because he showed it to his mom, who didn't live that far away at the time, and she said that she didn't like the idea of her son living in a rundown nigger shack. And it really hurt his feelings because he was really proud. This was his house, you know. He was very possessive of it. My house, you know. It's not a crummy apartment, it's a house, and it was like a little two-bedroom thing that he lived with Luke in.
Probably should have been bulldozed at the time. It really wasn't technically inhabitable, but they lived there anyway, and Kurt rarely worked and had little money, and so before too long we got to be friends and whatnot, and I worked and I was comfortable and I would cook and eat well, and so I'd invite him over for dinner, and of course then we'd talk more about music, and he ended up being a tremendous influence on me music-wise, and of course I was interested. I've always had a passion for music. So my relationship with the band just grew tighter and tighter and tighter in the sense that I was an enthusiast. I appreciated their music. I desperately desired this sort of cultural information from them, and was a volunteer, you know, a patron, where if they needed something, I was more than willing to, you know, volunteer. And that's really what the relationship later, as things began to be more productive, is, you know, it wasn't that I was ever asked formally to do anything for them. I just volunteered.
As the fledgling band started to gather an original repertoire, Ryan Aigner, a friend of Cobain and fan of the music, managed to secure a gig in Raymond, a small town south of Aberdeen. In March 1987, Nirvana embarked on their first and possibly most infamous performance.
The band plays their very first show at this kegger in Raymond, Washington. Pretty amazing event. I went and sat in the house they played in and managed to pull together a handful of people who were at that show to describe it to me, and it was a pretty remarkable event.
Ryan came over,
yeah,
and he would always come over here and we'd be playing and jamming and stuff. And he said he was managing that band at the time. I'm assuming he was. And he said, you got to hear these guys. These guys are really good. And he said, well, bring them on over, you know, on some weekend. I can't remember what the exact date is.
Yeah.
I think it was what?
It was March of '87.
It was like March of '87.
It was just some teenagers that, well, they're not teenagers, they're 20-something crowd guys that lived in this house, and every Friday and Saturday night was a party anyway. And whether the band played or the stereo played was no big deal to them. They didn't have outsiders coming in. It was a tight social circle again. There were the band dudes, and there were the groupie dudes, and then all our girlfriends and whatnot. So then this one Saturday, I had made these arrangements to bring these guys down. Well, it was the same problem with Nirvana. You know, they didn't, well, they weren't called Nirvana then, but you know, they'd just been rehearsing in this house. They hadn't done anywhere, gone anywhere, done anything, and I made this suggestion, maybe we should try something, go see what, you know, public reaction would be like. Well, the minute I even, you know, discussed it with Kurt, he was like, Raymond, that's going the wrong way, dude. You know, we don't want to go down into, you know, the interior. You know, we want to go to the city, get out of the swamp. But he agreed to go. And so we get there and we kind of socialized for a while, and he played. And from the very beginning, you know, it wasn't. He didn't put on a special performance for them. If you run the reel forward and look at the sort of classic Nirvana performance, it was all there. Everything. Same thing he did that night was same show he put on 4 or 5 years later. And but those people were watching a show that you know, they were used to entertainers. When the guitar turned on, this very introverted sort of person took an incredible amount of intensity, which you know, if you were close to him at all and you talked to him, you'd know this. But just to see him physically, he wasn't particularly animated or whatever. But when that guitar came on, the energy, he started to push out through the speaker. You know, he wasn't an animated performer either, but he terrorized the sound waves that night. Well, these people were they listened to classic rock, you know, and this guy was just feedback Blue Cheer style. I mean, just woo, going on and on and on and on and on, and then finally break into these songs. Well, and it weren't that they were bad songs; they were performed badly at all. They were new.
It was definitely different. I think that the whole crowd here was really mixed. Mm-hmm. You know, either you were open to hearing something new, or you just weren't at all. And they're not Metallica, and they need to get out of here.
Yeah, they need to start playing some AC/DC.
It was really, I think, down the middle.
And I think after, you know, when Jeff and I and everybody listened to the tape, then you kind of start to appreciate it more the more you'd listen to it.
There's a tape that exists of it, and no one even knew what their name was at that point. They didn't have a name. It was just like, oh, there's a band playing. And it wasn't particularly a great show by any description, but it still gave Kurt a sense that he could be a star. It gave him a sense that he could get that attention. As I write in Heavier Than Heaven, he found something that was very powerful. It was the narcotic of attention, which in some ways was actually more powerful to Kurt Cobain than drugs themselves. He loved being the center of attention, and you know, that from then on, he was sold.
You know, the beginning of Nirvana was a shaky ordeal for everybody involved, and like I said before, you know, if you look at as the analogy of the great plane taking off, that what it would turn into, it didn't even look like it was going to get off the ground at first.